Today on the show, we're playing a little game of Armchair Imagineering. Just imagine if Disneyland Park opened today instead of in 1955. Of course, since the beginning, Walt Disney was promoting his different films and television series in the theme park. But with the vast library of content that Disney now creates and owns, what might be the more current representations to appear in each of Walt's original Disneyland lands? Come along and listen to our thoughts on the subject matter, then call into the DCTC hotline, which you can find in this episode's description, and share some of your own ideas. Let the Armchair Imagineering begin.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
And today on the show, I have the modern mouse himself, Josh Taylor. Welcome to the show.
Why, hello. Thank you for having me. This is so nice.
You know, this is actually a topic I've wanted to do for quite a long time, and it's one of these topics that isn't exactly, time sensitive, and it's just kind of some silly fun. So there's no urgency to it typically, but I was like, you know what? This is the week. We're gonna do it, and we're gonna do kind of a bit of armchair imagineering here, because one of the things that I find super interesting about Disney fans, including myself, is we all like to complain about, the parks are only full of IP and intellectual properties these days. But it's always interesting to take that step back and look at opening day of Disneyland and really recognize the fact that Walt Disney himself was doing the same thing from the very beginning. So,
Totally.
Yes, it's not to the extreme that it is today, and perhaps it was more cohesive back then, but it is something that existed way back then. So we're going to take a look at Walt Disney's original lands in Disneyland and kind of look at it as if Disneyland was opening today in 2023. What are those IPs? What are those properties that would fit into these original lands? And just kind of have a bit of fun with it. Sound good to you?
That sounds great. I'm very interested in this.
I'm very curious to see what you came up with. So this should be a lot of fun. And let's just start with Adventureland. Now, something to note with Adventureland, speaking of, representing the product, was that the original name that they were considering for this land was True Life Adventureland, based on Walt Disney's True Life Adventure documentaries. I'm sure you knew that, right?
I did, yes.
Excellent. The current kind of big IP that's in Adventureland is Indiana Jones Adventure. It's been there for quite a few years, couple decades at this point. So it's been there a long time. But, if Adventureland were going to open today, I'm curious to know, what do you think is the IP? And we're talking about any area of Disney. As we all know, Disney owns a lot now. They own Marvel and Lucasfilm and Fox and National Geographic and everything and anything practically. What is the IP that you think would be stuck into Adventureland if Disneyland was opening today in 2023?
Yeah, so actually going off of what you had stated before, True Life Adventures was where this idea started. And the evolution of that was Disney Nature. And so for me, even though, yes, the e-ticket attraction in that land is Indiana Jones, I've always felt like the Jungle Cruise was always kind of like the original e-ticket for that land. And in that way, I thought, what better way to still have a river ride, but instead of a kind of cheeky tour guide through the jungle, it was actually much more based on, obviously you'd still do animatronics, but I would have more of kind of like that voiceover living with the land type of vibe that goes along the river rather than the more comedic route for this land in particular. So I would have this kind of, I don't have a name for it, but this kind of all-encompassing Disney nature documentary type style ride. So still kind of the Jungle Cruise, but slightly different.
So the original concept for Jungle Cruise was it was taken very seriously. It wasn't that kind of slapstick
Right,
humor.
yeah, it wasn't until Mark Davis, right, came in and changed it up a bit.
Yeah, Walt, from the story that I hear is that Walt was walking through the park and heard someone say, "Hey, do you want to go do the Jungle Cruise?" And the family member was like, "Yeah, we did that last time. No need to do it again." And Walt was like, "Oh gosh, we need to give them more to see, more to return for. We need new jokes all the time. We need gags in there that people won't catch the first time through. And that's when he brought in Mark Davis to kind of add the comedy to it. And that's when the spiel really kind of started. And of course, through the years, it's just gotten grander and grander as far as the comedy goes. So yeah, so you're kind of harkening back to the OG, take it more seriously. And when you say Disney nature, you're talking about those Disney nature documentaries like Earth and Chimpanzee.
Right.
And
Yeah. Another attraction for this area that I thought of would be taking the Tarzan concept, not doing the treehouse, but having kind of a shipwreck area where there's been a shipwreck and you are on an adventure to go find this young boy lost in the woods. And so kind of an e-ticket attraction, maybe in the same vein as Indiana Jones, that same kind of vehicle where you're, trouncing through the woods looking for this child, and you come across all the different animals within the film who help you in finding him. So in that way, that would be more of an e-ticket, kind of like, oh, this is more exciting than just a boat ride through, a little area that's not very exciting. But I love both those concepts. I think that Disneyland always needs a good mix of not only e-ticket attractions, but A, B, and C type of attractions as well.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, Disney fans show up for every level of attraction. It doesn't always need to be an e-ticket attraction to be popular. So that is very true. I also wrote down the Disney nature documentaries. I think would be a big influence these days on Adventureland. But also you got to remember now Disney owns National Geographic, which they keep seeming they fold into the company in very interesting ways. I was actually at Disneyland recently, and in the Mercantile in Frontierland, they were selling National Geographic microscopes and books and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's really interesting to see these things that they own just kind of creep into the parks that, they fit, but it also feels foreign. It's an interesting thing that you see there. But can we just talk about for a second how ironic it is that, frankly, in 2023, Indiana Jones is still very fitting?
Absolutely.
We got
maybe even more fitting than it was in the 90s when it got built.
True. Because what was it? When did it open? 1995, right?
It was mid 90s. So it had been a decade since the last film.
I think the last film was 1989, right? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yeah, so it had been, I believe, 6 years. So you're right. It was a little bit, it had been a while. And then they opened this attraction. They did nothing with that franchise until Indiana Jones 4, which was many years later.
Right.
But yeah, the ride has been popular, but even today, like you said, perhaps even more relevant with Indiana Jones 5 coming out this year. One film that I thought would kind of be an interesting thing to work into Adventureland would be Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book.
Oh, okay.
I kind of like that because it's more realistic than the animated film, and obviously The Jungle Book has some classic songs and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like that would be a kind of interesting one to work into Adventureland if it were to open today.
What type of ride would you do?
Once again, I do feel like, and this is just, I guess it's just because what we're used to, but I can't imagine an Adventureland without a boat ride, right?
Totally, yeah.
So, I mean, I can just picture Baloo on his back, with Mowgli floating atop, going alongside the boat. I think that would be super fun to see.
I could also see, especially in that film, the big climax is, kind of the forest being on fire. And we've seen stuff like that. I mean, we have that at Animal Kingdom. So maybe to have a giant forest fire kind of thing that, you have to learn to not be the man to mess with the forest.
Yeah, in Cali River Rapids, right?
Right.
Yeah, very, very good. That's a good idea. Another one that, listen, it's not real. It could be fitting, but people don't think Disney. But it's Fox, which Disney now owns. I'm a big fan of the current Planet of the Apes films.
Are you really? I'd never hear anyone talk about them at all.
I don't either. And to be fair, when I say big fan, I've seen them all once in theaters, and that's it. I can't even recall them. So what I should say is I really enjoy them. I shouldn't say big fan. That's a bit of hyperbole there, but I I just really enjoy them, and I'm not even like a big fan of the franchise or anything. Like the original films, even the Tim Burton one, like I was like, meh, whatever. But I really enjoy the new ones, and I just think that there is possibility for like an amazing attraction there. And I know attractions have been worked on for this franchise. I think it could work in Adventureland, and a simulator sort of ride, kind of like a Spider-Man or a Transformers. I feel like that sort of ride vehicle would be really cool. Not that I want it to be like super screen heavy. Like I always appreciate the mix more, like a Harry Potter Forbidden Journey sort of thing where you're going through practical elements and use the screens, or even Navi River Journey. I think does it beautifully, the mix of the two mediums. But I would love to see something Planet of the Apes, which is probably something most listeners are not expecting from me, but I'm just telling you, I think it would be cool.
It could work.
Yeah. Now, if I had a wish list sort of thing, stuff they would never, ever do. But I'm sorry, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is an epic adventure. And I think Adventureland would be fitting for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Never going to happen.
I feel like you're going to find a way to fit Honey, I Shrunk the Kids into any land.
I mean, I could, but I didn't. This is the only one that was like Honey, I Shrunk the, although, Tomorrowland, of course, it could. DuckTales the movie. I feel like that has a very Indiana Jones-esque sort of feel to it. I would love kind of like a kid's version of the Indiana Jones adventure, but like in more of a Fantasyland traditional dark ride sort of thing, and make it DuckTales the movie. I think that would be awesome and super popular.
It could be popular. I mean, without the resurgence, like the 2017 version of DuckTales, I do kind of feel like there's a certain demographic who loves it, you and I, but, I don't know if it's a property that necessarily would be worthy of that kind of thing, or big enough. But again, I could be wrong. But I think the resurgence with the 2017 show could add a lot to that. But again, if that was going to be your point, I think that Tailspin would also be an excellent, if anything, to have, Louie's Bar. And to be able to go in and grab a mocktail and hang out and kind of have this adventurous club type of vibe to it.
I love that, the Tailspin idea. I think that's great. Here's the thing that I would just like argue you on with that is I don't think IPs need to be popular to have popular attractions. I think sure. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is proof of that. I think Waterworld at Universal Studios, the stunt show that is still is one of the number one rated things ever in a theme park. It's like the movie is a bomb. So like I highly advocate taking things that are not super popular. Even if you feel like they're super niche, it's just like, I think the attraction could put it on the map as long as the attraction makes sense. Like I'd rather them take in a property that isn't super popular, but makes sense in the land or the world of what they're creating versus something that is super popular, or let's say something like a Princess and the Frog and sticking it in a Frontierland in Magic Kingdom. You know what I mean? Like that's less of a good fit, in my opinion, no matter how great the ride is, unless they get really creative. I am genuinely curious, as we all know, of course, at Disneyland, it makes a lot of sense with New Orleans Square. Magic Kingdom, not so much. So I'm curious to see what happens there with that. But yeah, DuckTales would, gosh, if we could have a Disney afternoon Adventureland, I would just be like, heck yeah, let's do it.
You never went to Disneyland this is sidetracking for a second, but you never went to Disneyland in the 90s, like 91, 92, when they did the Disney afternoon?
You're talking about Afternoon Avenue?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did not. Well, so here's my history with that. I grew up, as listeners of the show know, I loved the Walt Disney World Happy Easter Parade. That was like annual viewing for me. And I vividly remember one year, I believe it was the same year that they did like a whole Fantasmic promo. And the Olsen twins went to Afternoon Avenue and they showed this and I was like, holy crap, what is this? This is amazing. Never really got to experience that full on for myself. But just rewinding a few years, on 90s night, one of the Disneyland After Dark events, they recreated Afternoon Avenue, and it was awesome. And it was just like you had to go around to the different areas and collect these different stamps, and they had, cut out photo opportunities, and they had these balloons in a very similar style to what Afternoon Avenue was. Like it was so cool, and I felt like I got to experience it a little bit. But no, I did not get to experience the proper Afternoon Avenue. Did you?
I did.
Oh, you may have to come on and do a whole episode about that because, like, I'm a huge fan. Did you get to do like the gummy bear boats or whatever the heck they were?
Did the gummy bear boats? Did the Chip and Dale version of Autopia? Got to meet Baloo. I walked around kind of like the little Duckburg that they built. And this is a time period where my dad was like super excited, got like the giant, ridiculous like news camera camcorder and brought it with us. So like he actually it was the first like Disney trip we documented. We're able to get like all these cool Disney afternoon bits in it.
I love that. And we may genuinely need to talk about that more because I would love to do a deep dive into that and like talk to somebody who's like actually experienced it. Because for me, it's all been video footage. And, you know, it's funny because you say like the meet and greet with Baloo. I do vividly remember that. Baloo from Tailspin, of course. I think it was Walt Disney World, though. I think it was over there that I did that sort of stuff. Because as a kid, I went to Walt Disney World far more often than Disneyland, having grown up in Massachusetts. So, yeah, I kind of like the idea of a Disney afternoon Adventureland. I like it. Another one, though, that you were talking about a shipwreck earlier, I think in reference to Tarzan, correct?
Right.
How do we feel about a little Muppet Treasure Island in Adventureland?
Listen, I'm all for more Muppets anywhere, so put them in.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty fun if we had some Muppet Treasure Island in there. And I do not know this franchise. The title just kind of suggests to me that it might be a fit. I'm curious if you're familiar and or have an opinion on this. Does National Treasure fit into Adventureland?
It could. It would probably fit more on Main Street.
Okay.
I feel like there's a way to be able to walk into like, especially if you're looking at like more of the kind of historic main streets, there's a way to kind of walk into like a building and then go on that adventure, right? In the same way, like you would, like you walk into Gringotts Bank, it's a bank, but then like you go down in these dungeons and go on this crazy adventure. So I feel like there's more to do with that, but I think that you could make a case for Adventureland having an attraction like that.
Interesting. All righty. That's what I got for Adventureland. Anything else you want to add about Adventureland before we move on to a different land?
You know, I got nothing. I pulled that Louis bar out of nowhere, and I'm happy with it.
You know what? I love it. And frankly, I want to see them just do that. I love deep cuts. I love it when 90% of the people experiencing these things don't get it. It always kind of bothers me when they, like Disney Parks blog will explain it to everybody, like the Jock Lindsay's in Disney Springs, where it's like an Indiana Jones reference that frankly I wouldn't get, but I would love to like have somebody whisper it in my ear when I'm like there experiencing it or do the deep dive research, as opposed to, hey, we're doing something super niche, but here's what it is. You know, I'm like, doesn't that kind of take away from the nicheness of it if you're going to just explain exactly what you're doing? So
it's kind of like somebody telling you where a speakeasy is and you're like, oh, cool, like I'm in the know. But then like the speakeasy just goes online and is like, here's the directions to our place.
Exactly.
It's like I don't know. Everybody can't know.
Yeah. You know, if it's the best kept secret isn't a secret, you know, then, you know, it's not a secret if everybody knows. Cool. Let's move on to Frontierland, because here an original attraction was Davy Crockett Frontier Museum. And the Davy Crockett Frontier Arcade came in 1956. But of course, Frontierland was heavily, you know, involved with Davy Crockett, which was a huge, huge project for Disney at the time. There's actually still reference to Davy Crockett in Frontierland today. There's the Crockett and Russell store. If you look at the store, they have different signage and stuff. One of it says Crockett and Russell. So there's still references to Davy Crockett in that land. And as I said, huge, huge influence on it from the beginning. But what today do you think would fit in Frontierland?
This is my hardest one, and I'm kind of pulling, I mean, to your credit, saying like you should just pull from obscure stuff. To me, when I think of Frontierland, Westerns, Disney, I tend to either go with what's there with Davy Crockett. I mean, you could do Zorro, you could do a variety of things, but I think one of the greatest films, two films actually that they did with Disney, is The Apple Dumpling Gang. The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. They're brilliantly funny. They're absolutely silly. And I would probably put together more of a show here, like inside the Golden Horseshoe, or the Diamond Horseshoe if you're at Disney World, whatever. And I would probably put together like a big comedy kind of act, similar to what they've done in the past, but theme it all around the Apple Dumpling Gang. And I've really loved over the past couple of years, I don't know if it's like 5-6 years or so, that Knott's Berry Farm has been doing Ghost Town Alive. And they did bring that for a little while over to Disneyland in some sort of way.
Legends of Frontierland, big fan.
Yeah, like they did that for like 3 months, and it was like, why don't you do this all the time? This is amazing. But I would do something in that same vein where it is not just a stage show on stage, but it is much more encompassing of the audience and something that, when you go to sit down, you are very much a part of the show there. So I would definitely put together a show like that with the Apple Dumpling Game, which is, pulling that movie out of obscurity.
That is a deep cut. I will admit, I know the title, but I know nothing else about that film. That was like 70s, right?
Yeah. I think both films came out in the 70s.
Yeah, I definitely have like a blind spot when it comes to live action 1970s Disney. It's stuff that I didn't watch as a kid, and if I saw it as an adult, it's like I really kind of went out of my way to see it. It was just something that was not my natural proximity in my head anyway.
Yeah.
But the one I would go with that, it's a bit controversial these days, but I feel like Pocahontas is the film that would fit in this land. Frankly, I would like to see, mostly just because I love the music of Pocahontas. Like you said, this is a tough one as far as rides are concerned. I feel like this is, and to be fair, when Frontierland originally opened, it really wasn't about the rides. It was a lot more just kind of like walkthroughs and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. Pocahontas, I feel like, is probably the quote unquote biggest and quote unquote again modern, because it's not modern at all, Disney thing. I also was a fan. Did you ever see that movie Tall Tale, The Unbelievable Adventures of Pecos Bill? It was a live action movie.
Yeah.
Once again, 90s. But I really liked that movie as a kid. And of course, Pecos Bill is already part of Magic Kingdom's Frontierland with the Pecos Bill Tall Tale Inn and Cafe. So that's something else that, like, if you wanted to kind of work in that tall tale thing even more, because we don't have any of that in Frontierland at Disneyland whatsoever.
No. I also think that you could, in turn, be able to, because if we're looking at a quote unquote original Disneyland, so we're not going to have Critter Country or anything like that, right? That kind of area hidden back there. I think that you could do something like with a Paul Bunyan type of foresty area back there. You could also have John Henry talking about the locomotives being built in that area as well. So you could have kind of all the tall tale characters.
Yeah, which Walt did a lot with back in the day with the animated shorts. But like I said, it brought a little bit back to life with that film Tall Tale. And I could definitely see like a film franchise coming out of that these days, to be honest. They'll have their own universe, a cinematic universe. Now, have you seen Homeward Bound?
Of course, yeah. And the second one. Could
that fit in Frontierland?
I mean, it would fit just as good as Old Yeller, but it's way less sad.
True. I feel like Homeward Bound, and the film that I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if Disney was legitimately doing concept work for at the time, because it was expected to be a big hit, and it flopped. Lone Ranger. If that Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer film had done well, yeah, I feel like we would have seen Lone Ranger in Frontierland, don't you think?
We would have at least seen like a meet and greet for a period of time. But then you also get into, a sketchy area of how much Native American is Johnny Depp. And like, when you hire somebody to be in the parks, are they also Native? Then you get, I don't know, like there's just a lot of touch and go with that kind of thing. But had the movie done well, you probably would have seen it.
And it probably would have been a rule, like, we got to keep Jack Sparrow really far away.
Oh yeah,
from the Lone Ranger character. What was it? Is it Tonto? Is that who he played?
Yeah, Tonto. The other one too that I think they could have probably pulled from had it been successful, and this would sort of fit in Frontierland. It also sort of fit in Tomorrowland, which is John Carter.
That's on my list. Yep, I have right here. Could John Carter fit? I've never seen John Carter, but I know the
Yeah.
the concept and where, like, some of the origins. And yeah, agreed. I feel like those are things that could have potentially fit in the land if it were successful. But once again, I will say, I don't think that the success of a film really depends on the success of an attraction. So these are things that could potentially.
I do think, though, that John Carter, as much as I think it's kind of a cool idea, I think that people would be like, cool, I'm in this like Western, and then all of a sudden you're on Mars. And I don't, the buy-in from somebody, especially like for somebody like you who's never seen the film, or somebody who years later wouldn't even know what the property is about, it would be like culture shock, where it's just like, cool, we're in this Western, and then, oh, there's aliens. What the heck? So I don't know if that would work as well. I think that you need to, if you're going to do Frontierland, you have to stay in Frontierland. One that I did have written down that I didn't bring up yet is, the obvious answer here would be Coco, to be able to go to the land of the dead.
Yeah, but does that fit Frontierland? I know they put Coco over there, but like, is that the frontier?
I mean, it is still, it's Mexico, right? So it would be, to me, Frontierland kind of encompasses any area that is like land that Mexico used to own that was just like sold off to America. But I do think that it can fit.
All right. I mean, listen, I'm all for anything Coco. I would love to see more Coco in the parks. But going back to John Carter for a second, I have a fix for the whole, frontier to Mars sort of thing. The attraction starts in Frontierland, ends in Tomorrowland. Boom.
How are you going to pull this off?
I have no idea. Tunnels.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. We're in the blue sky phase right now, Josh.
Sure,
Please
sure.
do not hinder my blue sky storytelling at the moment.
Hey, I'm on your side.
Fair enough. So yeah, that's what I've got for Frontierland. Anything else you want to add? I like I said, I really would love to see more Coco in the parks. I love Coco.
Yeah, this is probably one of the hardest ones for me. So that's kind of where I stood for it.
I agree. Well, let's hop over to Fantasyland then, where the opening day representation included films like Dumbo, Alice in Wonderland, Mickey Mouse Club, The Wind in the Willows, Peter Pan, and Snow White. But if Fantasyland were to open today, I think it would look a lot different. I would hope that there'd be a nod to Snow White, the original full-length animated feature. But aside from that, where does your head go, Josh?
I would probably pick a couple of attractions. Again, I would leave it similar layout to the way it is, in the sense that most of it is dark rides. I just feel like, for me, when I think of Fantasyland, I just think of a gaggle of dark rides. But I do want to reach back. I'm with you. I think that Snow White being the first film, it makes sense that there's still an attraction based around Snow White. But I would go to different decades, different eras of Disney here. I know, popularity, I don't know if anybody cares or not, but Frozen is an obvious choice for the reason of it being just absolutely insanely popular. I would actually choose to do an Aladdin attraction in this area. And I know, again, that could probably have gone in Adventureland. They've done it at Walt Disney World. But I would put Aladdin here as well. Another one that I would pull from, a little bit more obscure, but I think that Robin Hood would be a lot of fun. It's a very classic tale, and I don't think anybody's ever done it before in an attraction.
Yeah, that's one of those films that people often forget about. Once again, 70s, right? It's like that blind spot for me, but that I do remember as a kid. But yeah, Frozen, I think, is the obvious choice. I mean, listen, if it wasn't Sleeping Beauty Castle, what castle do you think it would be? Do you think it would be? And don't give me the amalgamation of all the different Disney princesses, because that's a cop-out and that is crap. Which princess do you think it would be? It would probably be Elsa, in my opinion.
You think so? Like, I think that is too much of a stylistic choice. I think that I think that the castle has to be kind of, not all encompassing in the case of all the different castles together, but one that feels like any princess could live there.
I would go with Beast's Castle if it were my choice.
That's where I would go as well.
I would love to see like a full blown. I really wish they did that in Disneyland Paris. I think it's actually a huge miss that they didn't build like Beast's Castle in Disneyland Paris, considering the story takes place in France. But I would love to see Beast's Castle. I mean, that small interpretation of it that we get at Magic Kingdom is cool, but small and,
Right.
obviously not the icon. So, yeah. Any other titles that you think would be represented these days in Fantasyland?
I would love, this is a real personal one for me, because it's a movie that every time I've watched it, it's gotten better for me, is Lady and the Tramp. I feel like going through that story in a small little dark ride would be super charming. It is, to me, I feel like it's a film that suits a lot of different generations. And I think every time I've watched it, it only gets better. The animation only gets better. The story's fantastic. Slept on Disney film.
You want to hear an interesting little factoid about Lady and the Tramp and me is Lady and the Tramp is the reason I visited Marceline, Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
And I say that because as I was getting ready to move across the country from Massachusetts to Los Angeles, I decided, hey, I'm going to make an epic road trip out of this with a friend. And so I picked my stops and I was watching like special features on the Lady and the Tramp DVD as I was like preparing for this. And there was a special feature all about how like Marceline inspired the town in the look of Lady and the Tramp. And I was like, honestly, I think at the time it had kind of been like the first I'd really heard about Marceline, Missouri. And so I kind of just did like a deep dive into it. And then I looked at the timeline and they were having their annual Toon Fest celebration that September.
Oh.
And it was soon around when I was thinking of going. So I was like, you know what? I am going to time my road trip across the country in order to hit Marceline during the Toon Fest celebration. And it was like lovely, delightful. I still really want to get back. I know they're doing the Walt Disney Hometown Museum there is doing some great stuff. They're doing some really cool events. And yeah, I'd love to go back sometime. But the whole reason I ever went in the first place is because of Lady and the Tramp. So thank you, Lady and the Tramp.
There you go. Yeah. Lastly, I would add, as far as restaurants, I would pull from Tangled and put in the Snuggly Duckling.
Yeah, that makes sense. I am curious though, as a Lady and the Tramp fan, how did you feel about the live action film that like premiered with Disney Plus?
So if I was to rank all of the different live action films that they've done, the Lady and the Tramp sits probably in my top 3.
Oh wow. What
Yeah,
are the
I
other
actually really
two?
liked it. For me, Cinderella's at the top. I think that is probably the best of all of them. The other one that I think is good, I don't like it. I prefer the animated one, but I would probably put the Jungle Book in there as well. Probably at number 3, I might put Lady and the Tramp up above it, to be honest.
Alrighty, fair enough.
Yeah.
So like you, of course, the films we grew up with are probably the first ones to come to mind, but I would definitely hope that there was some like Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid representation. Those were huge for me. I love your idea of Aladdin. I think Aladdin deserves like a really cool dark ride. In fact, whenever I see the window on Main Street at Disneyland, the Aladdin window where there's the whole transformation that happens, I'm always like, that would be such a cool scene in a dark ride. Like I would love that. Huge potential. Frozen, as you said, I think would be there. Hopefully Snow White. I feel like Encanto would be worked into it these days. It just feels like something they would do.
Probably so. If not a ride, then definitely some kind of show.
Restrooms. Encanto restrooms.
Sure. Yeah.
Fair enough. So, yeah, that's Fantasyland. I mean, the traditional dark rides are the way to go, I think, in Fantasyland. And, of course, there's other things. There's the classic Dumbo flying elephants and stuff like that. But just out of curiosity, do you have a favorite of those dark rides that do exist there?
Yeah, actually, I think the Alice in Wonderland attraction is probably my favorite of the dark rides. Of everything that's in Fantasyland, I'm such a sucker for the Storybook Land canal boats.
Really?
Yeah, I love them.
Please, tell me more.
I absolutely love the canal boats. I think that it's super charming. I love the history behind Walt wanting to build like a miniature land. Of course, it never came to fruition. I love that for the first few months of the attraction, it was just like nothing. It was just like a waterboat ride through mud, which I think is hilarious. I think the history there is just funny. I actually think it's probably the most romantic attraction at Disneyland, especially when you get to that area where they play the music from Aladdin and you go under like the gazebo with all the lights and then you go into like the Cave of Wonders. It's just such a cool attraction that's so unique, that is so simple, and no other place on earth that I can think of has an attraction like that.
And they do update it. Like yes, it's old and yes, it's super simple, as you said, but like they have, Elsa's castle in there. They update it. So, it's taken care of. I saw something really cool recently. Did you go and see, I think it was a Disney 100 exhibit that's in the Opera House, where they have like a lot of concept art and stuff. And I saw something I'd never seen before, and that is in the Storybook Land canal boats. They have that area that I think they still refer to it as like the quilt, where they have all these different vegetation and kind of like a quilt shape and stuff. Did you see the concept art I'm going to talk about?
I did, yeah.
No, did you know about this before?
I did, yeah. I'd done some like I did some heavy research into that attraction for something. I don't remember what it was, but like I put in some time on that ride.
All right. Well, the concept art for our listeners is it was a giant quilt, and they had the head of a giant poking out of one end and his giant feet out the other. And so like that's why it was a quilt, because it was a sleeping giant with a quilt over him. And so like the quilt exists, they call it that, but without those pieces, it's kind of like less obvious as what it was. But I thought that was such a fun original concept, and I'm pretty sure if you go to Disneyland Opera House today with the Disney 100 stuff, it should still be in there. I don't think that has swapped out.
I think it's still there. Yeah,
check it out, because it's some fun concept art. But that is not the one I would expect for someone to say. But hey, I'm with you with the dark rides at Alice in Wonderland. I think is just beautiful and spectacular, and ever since they updated it and put in the projections and stuff, just even better.
Perfect.
So good.
Yeah. And it's again such a weird attraction, because they added like that later scene in the 80s when they redid Fantasyland. So it's just like super weird. I mean, it's fitting for Wonderland, but like to basically exit out of the attraction, go down some leaves, and then re-enter the attraction for what is essentially maybe 20 seconds before popping back out is so interesting and funny. I love that attraction.
Yeah, good times. It has a pretty long wait too. Not quite Peter Pan wait, but
right.
It's a pretty healthy wait for that one usually. Alrighty, let's move over to another opening day land, and that is Tomorrowland, where Walt was promoting his film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, as well as a lot of like real science-y stuff as well. But today, what do you think is the thing that would be featured in Tomorrowland?
I am a super big sucker for OG Tomorrowland, the like science fair Tomorrowland. So I would have this idea circling around initially kind of Big Hero 6 and having the science fair there. But I would also try and pull some other scientists in, which will probably make you happy, that I'm putting in
Wayne Szalinski?
A Wayne Szalinski Honey, I Shrunk the Kids attraction, as well as a Flubber attraction. And then I also thought that in representing Everything Possible would be able to put in a Tony Stark Marvel attraction that is not what they did with the launch bay back several years ago. And it's not the, attraction that we see now with the rock and roller coaster that they did at Paris. But to me, like the key attraction of this whole thing would be the Big Hero 6 attraction, where you not only get to go to the science fair, but you actually get to save the day with the rest of the Big Hero 6 and kind of a big e-ticket. I'm thinking more along the lines of like that Spider-Man attraction, not the one at California Adventure, the one over at Islands of Adventure in that regard.
Yeah, I love all that, but I need to know. Of course, I need to ask. What are some of the details of this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids Wayne Szalinski attraction? What kind of attraction are we talking here?
My thought process is going back to OG Disneyland, and going through on like a little Omnimover track and being shrunk down and having to go through the backyard and survive. And, then you get to see overhead like this giant magnifying glass where Dad's coming down to like see where you're at and whatnot. And eventually you get zapped back up to regular size. So it is kind of a slow moving Omnimover, but I think that would be just really fun to see a bunch of big stuff around you.
Adventure through inner space with Wayne Szalinski.
Right, exactly.
I love it. I'm sold. I mean, for me, I think, if we're going to have it in a Disneyland that opened today that didn't have Star Wars Galaxy's Edge existing, even though we already have this, I think Star Wars would obviously be featured here. I think Avatar would be featured here. A movie from Fox that, I don't know that it was a hit or people remember it, but The Martian would be fitting, I feel like, for Tomorrowland. But no, I give you Tomorrowland. Like, I am sold on your concept, and that's all I want.
I mean, I sold you just on the fact that I brought in a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yes and no. Listen, that sweetened the deal, but I like the concept as a whole with the whole Big Hero 6 kind of science fair concept. I think that's a better concept than what we have there right now. I mean,
yikes.
We all know that Tomorrowland needs some help. And do you think that that's where the Avatar stuff's going to go, that they're teasing?
I mean, it has to, right? Like I don't think that they can tease something like that with the Disneyland Forward project, knowing that that's still years and years away. And if it's going to sit in Disneyland proper, Tomorrowland just feels like the realistic fit. There's no way that it could fit in Adventureland, which would be the only other possible option.
Well, have they said it's Disneyland Park, or could it be DCA?
I think they've said it's Disneyland Park proper. So,
interesting. Because I've said this on a previous episode, but I think Redwood Creek Challenge Trail is kind of the place that would make sense for it. I think they could work something interesting there. But yeah, I mean, if it does go to Disneyland, I hope it's Tomorrowland. Well, they're not going to take out the Launch Bay building because they just put the DVC Lounge there. So unless it's Bye Bye Autopia or Submarines, I don't know.
I mean, realistically, what would you feel about Star Tours going away and then using the theater, like the space that was the theater there next door to it as well? Basically that entire right-hand side all the way up to Space Mountain.
I'd be honestly perfectly fine with that because Star Tours is a great ride. It's has an amazing run. They do keep updating it, which is we just got news of more updates, so I don't think that's going to happen. But I am of the mindset that if you have an entire land dedicated to an IP, you should not have individual attractions, especially in the same park, based on that IP. So I'd be totally fine with it. I just don't see it happening. But I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see what they end up doing with that. But in any case, for those of you listening who are saying, Jeff, what are you thinking? You just did Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, but there was a fifth land on opening day of Disneyland. Yes, you're right. No, I did not forget it. It's just one that's really weird. And frankly, I even hate that I have to say this. We're going to talk about Main Street USA. And the reason I hate to talk about it is because Main Street USA, of course, opened with Disneyland in 1955. It represents around the year 1910, which means it's 45 years earlier. So if we're now in 2023 and we rewind 45 years, it brings us to 1978. And I don't know if you listeners know this about me, but I hate the 70s. I hate the music. I hate the aesthetic. I hate the hairstyles. I hate almost everything about the 70s. Like, I even have a hard time watching movies that take place in the 70s. Very few exceptions, one being Studio 54. Really fascinated by that club's history. But yeah, I don't like the 70s. So a 1978 Main Street USA, I think, would be revolting. And I think that they would be smart enough to be like, that ain't going to work. But let's just say it did. Let's just say in 1978, Main Street did exist for the sake of this fun little game and going back 45 years. What would we have on Main Street USA, Josh?
Okay, so I agree with you. The architecture in general, like the kind of like super bland, blocky buildings of the 70s are just ugly. But I do think that a lot of the mid-century architecture did kind of find its way into the 70s still. So I would kind of cheat a little bit and say we're still kind of going with that like 60s mod vibe for this Main Street. As far as like actual shops and stuff, I mean, at this point, right, all of the Disneyland shops are kind of all just one big shop that are all Disney shops. Obviously, when the park opened, they were all unique shops and did kind of fit the time period. The problem is when I think about the 70s, and this is really kind of like sad to say, I think about like the gritty Times Square that was just like, here's an adult theater over here, and here's like an alleyway where you buy drugs and stuff. And like, so it's really difficult to think about like one of the shops there being like unique to the 70s. But I do think that there could be some fun toy shops and different type of clothing shops, kind of generic. I mean, this is when malls weren't necessarily becoming popular, but like the idea, concept of a mall was coming in. But I do think it would be fun to come up with some 70s style concept gifts to take home. Like, you know, classic pet rocks, but with with little characters on them. Things like that would be a lot more fun. I personally like the color palette of the 70s, kind of like I'm much more of a 60s mod pastels type of person.
So it's like you're talking about like those browns and like deep oranges and
but like yeah, kind of like
vomit greens,
the avocado green, the kind of burnt orange and stuff. Like it's fine in doses, Jeff. It's fine.
I hate the 70s so much. I'm so glad I didn't live at any point during the 70s.
Carpeted walls, you know.
The carpets were gross. Oh,
yeah. Just shag carpets everywhere. I think though that you could get away with some really cool designed, and this is something that I think that they've done really well. Remember when they opened Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout? A lot of the stuff that was in there wasn't necessarily Guardians themed. There was like a lot of like 70s, 80s kind of stuff in there. I would bring a lot of that kind of stuff back. Like, I think that there's some really cool typography and graphic design type of stuff that goes with the 70s. And, you know, you could bring in some of the things that were popular at that time period to try and sell.
You know what was invented in 1978 was
what was it?
The little Lego man.
Ooh, okay. So would you bring a Lego shop?
Something Lego with the little Lego man would be very fitting for 1978. I also think a vinyl record shop, which is like, you know, hip again today, is something that we would probably see. Ben & Jerry's opened its first ice cream shop in 1978 as well.
Okay.
So, but here's the thing. I don't want disco music playing on Main Street.
But I don't want Motown.
What was that?
A little Motown?
Maybe some Motown. That could work, perhaps. Yeah. I don't want the cars of the 70s driving up and down Main Street USA. No, we don't need that. Here's the thing. I do not want a Main Street USA 1978. This was purely math, and we have had to discuss it. So
this is completely your concept. Like you made this yourself. You put this burden on yourself.
You're right, but like I couldn't do all of the lands and not Main Street. So sure. I am a completionist, and we had to talk about it. So yeah, that's it. And let's hope that never happens. No, if anybody at Disney Special Events is listening, I do not want a Disneyland After Dark 70s night. No, thank you.
Come on, man.
Would you attend that?
Yeah, and I would dress up like the scientist woman in Spaceship Earth with the giant fro.
Yeah, Imaginary Cupcake. That woman.
Yeah, super fun. I would
the Afro woman.
Yeah, why not?
Sure, what the heck? Why not? There's zero problems with you dressing up as that character.
As a black woman from the 70s? Yeah. Absolutely not a problem. I think something that could work on Main Street would be more of a museum type of exhibit, looking at some of the technology that came from that time period. So you could go back and look at old camcorders, VCRs, actual photography cameras, things like that. You could set up a Pong arcade unit over there, kind of talk about the birth of video games out of that. Like, there's some interesting things to do as far as like more of a museum exhibit about the 70s.
A roller rink on Main Street, USA.
I mean, that would be fun.
Get rid of the Opera House. Just put a roller rink in there. Now we're losing it. I'm going to ask you something. I'm going to put you on the spot. But so we've talked about the lands that did exist on opening day and, you know, what they might be like in 2023. But if Disneyland were to open today and there was an additional land that does not exist anywhere to fit in a 2023 Disneyland, what do you think that land might be? I'll start because I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, go for it.
I actually don't think is a terrible idea. I don't think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's terrible. But if there was like a live action remakes land, perhaps called the Reimagination Land, where, because I don't like mixing the mediums, right? Like an interesting thing that does this is the Red Rose Tavern in Fantasyland at Disneyland. They mix like the animated Beauty and the Beast with the live action Beauty and the Beast. You'll see like the characters painted on the walls, but then you'll see like the live action versions like on display of like Cogsworth and such around. And I don't like mixing the mediums. It's kind of like, I mean, now we're getting the live action Ariel in the parks, and I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but I don't know. I like to keep things separate. So if there were a whole land, because I think some of those live action films are worthy of attractions or shows or whatever. If there were a whole land dedicated to that, and frankly, we're in a time where Disney's doing a lot of that,
yeah,
I feel like that could be something that could exist and could potentially be successful. Whether or not it would survive like the test of time, I don't know.
Right. I mean, we're pretty lucky in the fact that a majority of these lands have all the lands that we've talked about have all lasted the test of time. Considering that Disneyland has no extra space, they seem to keep pulling extra space out of nowhere. But why they haven't bulldozed Adventureland or Tomorrowland is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, especially Tomorrowland. Like, I think the way that Disneyland Paris handles it by calling it Discoveryland.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't want any of Walt's original lands renamed, but if Magic Kingdom were to change Tomorrowland to Discoveryland, as long as the Carousel of Progress remained, I'd be totally cool with a name change.
Or just move that back here. Put it back in the building and just have the DVC lounge above it.
100%. I mean, sold. You don't have to convince me at all. I would kill for Carousel of Progress at Disneyland Resort.
Yeah.
I would love it. But in any case, is there a land that you could think of in 2023 that might be fitting?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to already have like a name for this land because I love that just all the lands are blank land. But having a Renaissance Fair area that is not fantasy, like Fantasyland feels much more fantastical, but actually having a more realistic Ren Fair kind of space would make sense. A lot of the stories that Disney's pulled over time in their animated films, even in some of their live action films, have come from that time period or set in that time period. You could take my concept for a Robin Hood attraction, put it over there. You could do a Brave thing, put it over there.
Oh, no. No Brave.
Listen, you got to have some kind of cool archery set up. You might as well just theme it to Brave.
No. If you're going to do archery, theme it to Robin Hood.
Okay, fine. But like there are a bunch of different things that you could put into that area that I think would work. And Renaissance festivals have proven that people are really interested in kind of living out that concept. So why not just have something that's much more true to that nature?
Yeah, I would love to see something. I've talked about this. It might have been on somebody else's podcast. I can't remember, but like a wooded land where like you're going into a forest and you can come across things like, the Aurora's aunt's, her fairy godmother's little cottage, and you can come across Merlin's cottage and the Sanderson sisters' cottage, and even some Into the Woods in there since Disney's made that movie. Like, I think a wooded area would be very cool. Like, just atmospherically would be cool. I mean, just think of Villains Grove at Oogie Boogie Bash. I think you could do some amazing things with a wooded area.
You could, absolutely. And obviously people really seem to care about like sightlines these days more than ever. That would obviously obscure a lot of things. So having just giant trees everywhere and like something about Disney, if anybody was going to do that kind of thing, I mean, Universal probably as well, would be able to uproot a bunch of giant trees and plant them in a space. So I could see that happening as well.
I love it. Anyway, cool. Josh, this was fun. This was silly, but this was fun, and I appreciate you going along for the ride. So thank you so much for coming on the show to discuss. Anything you would like to plug before we get out of here?
The only major thing I'm doing these days really is Modern Mouse on YouTube. So if you go to check me out, youtube.com/Modern Mouse, where I post pretty frequently these days, different videos that pretty much the idea of the concept of the YouTube channel is looking in history and analyzing different Disney films over time. I just did a whole video about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and whether or not we should consider trigger warnings for movies in general. That was kind of a discourse that I saw coming out of that film. I've also recently done videos about all of the Pinocchio films over time. Gosh, what else have I done? I've been talking about Muppets. So if you're a Muppets fan, I do quite a bit of that. And I've been introducing more of kind of a narrative story arc into my videos too. So if you catch a video and you're like, what's going on here? Go back a ways and you'll be able to catch up on the story.
Excellent. So folks, head on over to YouTube, check out A Modern Mouse, Josh. And Josh, thanks once again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. This was so fun.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Disney with a Z, coast to coast on your favorite podcast app where episodes are available 24/7. If you're a longtime listener of the show, thank you. And if you have the means, consider supporting the show over on Patreon. By joining Disney Coast to Coast's Patreon membership, you'll gain access to extra bonuses including live stream Ask Me Anythings, one of which is happening later this month, unreleased episodes, and more bonus content. Take a look at all that's available by clicking the Patreon link in this episode's description, and thank you for considering. Until next time, anything you need can be found in this episode's description. From additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, contact info to reach me, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!